Hello, Internet. We met again in this podcast. I would like to show you some of question about Mexican culture, and today I have a guest from Mexico, which is his couchsurfing friend, and this is kind of like one of my episodes about interviewing some random people from different countries. And in this change I have a friend, his name is Raul, and he's traveling in Indonesia for 3 weeks. And this question that I would like to ask to him are about something that related in cultural studies in Mexico and Indonesia in general. So, Raul, can you introduce yourself to us?
Hello everyone, I am Raul from Mexico. I am 29 years old. I'm a biologist and I've been traveling in Indonesia, as Qori said, for 3 weeks.
Okay, first thing first, that I would like to ask you about some reason why you come Indonesia in the first place, and what do you see in general about interesting facts that you find while you travel in Indonesia, and what kind of travel that you use in Indonesia. For example, are you travel by regular traveling, backpacking, or do hitchhiking or anything else?
Well, why I choose Indonesia? I've always wanted to travel through Indonesia. I think due to its geography of many islands, the culture and the biodiversity is super interesting. Its geological history has made it have a lot of endemisms and have really specific wildlife in its jungles. I normally like tropical areas as Indonesia, so that's one of the main reasons why I chose Indonesia. As a biologist, to get to know a little bit more about the diversity. As how I travel, I'm a really low budget traveler, so I normally just hitchhike, camp, and stay in friends' houses. Bring my own camping stuff, my own cooking gear. Always carrying some oats, some rice, sugar, salt, cooking stuff, and stop here and there and cook. Stay very little. It's just sometimes about forgetting about normal commodities, and once you get used to forgetting that, you can travel pretty easily. Also, people are always really friendly, so it's no problem.
So, when you travel, is that language a barrier for you when you meet the people here? So, I heard that you can speak some bahasa Indonesia. And how do you learn this process in bahasa Indonesia? Do you have any tips for people who want to master some basic phrases in traveling when you go to Indonesia?
Well, I've only learned very little, but I think the best way to learn is to go to a place where you got no option but to speak the language. So I've only been traveling in Kalimantan, which it's not so easy to find English speakers. So I crossed into Kalimantan. I started hitchhiking, and at first I didn't know any word at all. So I just was trying to communicate with hands and stuff, and trying to learn little by little every day, just with people, just asking a lot of times, how do you say this? How do you say that? The other, how do you say this? And then later try to pay attention to people when they're talking, and try to pick up some words, and later just try to put them together. And even though it sounds completely wrong, just that doesn't matter. Just try to speak and try to speak and try to speak, and eventually it will start making sense. So the little I've learned it this way, just trying to speak to the people, paying attention to their conversations, trying to pick up words, putting them together. Yeah. Saya Raul dari Meksiko. Saya ada 29 umur atau tahun. Saya keliling-keliling Borneo karena Borneo ada banyak hutang dengan banyak binatang. Saya mau lihat ular, kadal, katak, biawak, labi-labi, banyak binatang, burung. Borneo ada banyak endemik burung. Saya mau lihat. Dan orang Indonesia bagus, orang Indonesia ramah sekali. makanan Indonesia enak sekali ya. Saya suka itu banyak ya. Ya saya ada banyak experience cantik ini.
So, as you mentioned that you said that Indonesian people are nice and they are friendly, and how do you see as a foreigner toward Indonesian people, and what is your experience with them? Could you show us what is the example being meeting Indonesian people to us?
All the experiences I've had so far with Indonesian people have been great, really lovely. Indonesians are super friendly, super welcoming. I've been invited to eat everywhere, especially while traveling in Kalimantan, which apparently not many travelers come, at least in this season, which is low season. So on my 3 weeks here, I think I've seen no other traveler. So people are always really happy to see you. I walk into the markets and people say, "Hey, Mister, dari mana? Oh, dari Mexico. Oh, yeah, Marimar or whatever." And it's fun to start conversations, and they start asking questions, and it's always in a really friendly way. Also, the kids are always like, "Hey, Mister, selfie," and they approach to take photos, and I don't mind at all. It's fun. People, I think that there's some places where people go say like, "Hey, what do you want to go there?" There's not much to see, but they forget about sometimes the richness or the speciality of the place. It's people, It can be just a place where there's nothing, but just the people make it the most worthy place to visit, because people here are super friendly, super nice, and worth getting to know.
So, what kind of places that you have been travel, and what is something that's all really unique you found in Indonesia when you travel? You say that you have been travel in Kalimantan only. What is your next destination? Are you going to explore all of the Indonesian parts?
Well, in Kalimantan, I started in West Kalimantan, Kalimantan Barat, and I was interested in getting to know a little bit about the indigenous culture. So I stayed in a couple of Dayak kampungs, one called Sungai Trik, which had a really old longhouse, which I really enjoyed staying in. Not like the modern longhouses that I've seen in a lot of places and that they show to tourists. This was like a really authentic one. It was pretty much like a museum as a house, very long. It had around, I think, 33 or 34 houses, 34 floors. Super long, interesting. Then I stayed in another kampung where I met some people from an NGO, a conservation NGO, and they invited me with Dayak people to make an expedition to the jungle for 6 days, which was a really nice experience. None of them spoke English, so it was a nice experience, not only for the jungle but also like to learn and improve a little bit on Indonesian. I was in Pontianak where I met really nice people from University Club, Mountaineering Club, and they were organizing an expedition to the Carstens Pyramid in Papua. So it was I have a little bit of a mountaineering experience, so they were like asking for advice and stuff. So it was nice to be part of their preparation for the expedition. Then I stopped. I was while hitchhiking. I met a family, a super nice family that invited me to their kampung close to Sandai, where I eventually was invited to teach in a junior high school. So I was for 2 weeks going teaching a little bit of English, a little bit of biology, a little bit of geography. Sorry, and trying to make the students fall in love with the jungles and understand the importance of their conservation, trying to do a little bit of this. Then I've come to Banjarmasin, where I think super nice city, super good place to do some photography. There's like I read it was like the Venice of Asia. Its main activities lies around the rivers, around the channels, and there's somehow some certain kind of poetry around the streets of Banjarmasin, and I like it very much. I visited Champaga mines to see how the people are still working for the diamonds, the diamond market, and it's all been nice experiences. Okay, well, Indonesia, there's lots of places to visit. I would like to have a lifetime to explore Indonesia. No, so many islands. But what I'm trying to visit on this trip, well, first Borneo was my main objective. I've been here already for some time, so I'm crossing to Sulawesi to explore a bit the jungles, and then I have a friend there that has a sailing boat, and there's a big chance we're gonna have an opportunity to sail to the Moluccas, which I'm also interested in because of their history when they were like one of the capitals of the commerce of the world due to the spice industry and everything. Also, there's a lot of interesting animals I want to see there. Really some cool lizards in the islands around the Moluccas. And if everything goes well and we're still on the boat, there's going to be a chance we're going to travel to Raja Ampat. So we're going to explore a little bit around Raja Ampat by February or March. And yeah, I'm super excited to get to know about to travel to those islands, which seems to be like paradise, you know.
And so, do you have any specific tips, personal tips for traveling in Indonesia generally? I mean, how can you find different things that the places that you've traveled before?
Well, one of the tips maybe I could give is to not plan so much. Maybe only have an idea of what you want to visit, what kind of things you want to see. But don't stick to a strict schedule. So sometimes what I do is just look at a map and choose a random spot, a random village as farther away from the city sometimes, most of the times, and then just try to go there, hitchhike or something, and just see what the road brings. You know, there's always something gonna happen. You know, you're gonna meet someone that's gonna bring you to their house, or you're gonna end up in a village, or you're gonna meet a truck driver that then is gonna invite you somewhere. I don't know. It's always there's like, don't stick to a schedule, don't plan too much, and just like let the experience develop by itself. Hitchhiking, even though it's a different language, it's not that hard. It's just at first I started only like with hand language, and then with a little of my really limited bahasa. It's not really hard. People in Indonesia are super helpful, super friendly. So if they see you on the road, they'll normally stop and try to ask you where you're going, where you want to go, and then they'll invite you to hop in their car.
Okay, let's speak about the cross-cultural understanding between Mexico and Indonesia. You know, in the early 20s, there was a telenovela booming in Indonesia, which everyone liked watching soap opera from the Mexico, your country. And how do you see about them? I mean, I'm familiar with some of the telenovela like Amigos, Maria Mercedes, Marimar, and etc. That those were my part of my childhood. And how do you see those telenovela as a cultural invasion from Mexico? I think for current trend right now is not something like from the Latin America. So how do you see when you when you hear from people speak about a telenovela that comes to their minds when you mention that you come from Mexico?
Yeah, well, that's been super funny. I never expected to find people watching this soap operas from Mexico. These are super old soap operas that I watched maybe when I was 6 or 7 years old, or maybe even younger, when I was in Mexico. So it's been kind of a flashback to come here and say that I'm from Mexico, and then like, everyone's like, oh yeah, Marimar, Maria Mercedes, Amigos por Siempre, Carita de Ángel, and they sometimes even know some words or some phrases learned from watching these soap operas. So I was pretty surprised to see how popular they are here, and that they still show them on some of the TV channels. So yeah, it's been kind of a flashback to see them and to hear people mentioning this really old Mexican soap opera. It's been a funny experience.
So Mexico is not only about telenovela, right? Is there anything something interesting about Mexico culture in general? And what do you think about people who think that Mexico is just kind of developing country? So what is or are something that you want to brag when you should visit Mexico?
Well, if there's something I would brag about Mexico, it's Mexican gastronomy. Mexican has a really well developed food culture, coming from a mixture between indigenous culture and gastronomy and ingredients brought by the Spanish during the colony ages. It has a really, really, really good food that I haven't found so far in any of the places I visit. There's many dishes that change from one place to another. Dishes that take 1 or 2 days to prepare, with really lots of ingredients, and it's one of the best foods I've tried. Not because I'm Mexican, but it's a really well developed gastronomy. Another thing I would brag about is Mexican landscapes and topography. It has both two coasts on the Pacific, which is really beautiful. It has Caribbean, it has tropical jungles, it has mountains, volcanoes, savannas, lots of indigenous towns all over in the mountains and in the deserts, with a big indigenous rich culture. They speak in Mexico more than 68 indigenous languages. There's a lot of archaeological sites. There's I think around 180 archaeological sites open to the public, but it's estimated that there are in total around 40,000 archaeological sites, with pyramids from ancient indigenous times. So there's a lot of things, places and places to visit and things to try.
So those are something that you can really proud of being Mexican. And this is kind of straightforward to be a more open and bold question. Is there any something that you really don't really agree what that Mexican looks like? Let's say this question is about something that about part of being or Mexican country in general.
I think the what I would like the less in Mexico, what I dislike and I hate, it's Mexican politics. Super corrupt, draining all the resources and the energy, and the economy is going down. It's sad to see that a country that has so much to offer, that could be a world capital for tourism, with so much natural resources, being so going down on its economy and everything. So it's all due because of the corruption of its politicians, which just saying for themselves, and not serving as they should do as politicians. It's the biggest or the worst thing about Mexico, I would say it's politicians.
Okay, the last question, because Indonesia and Mexico are basically same developing country, and how do you see when you compare between Indonesia and Mexico? What do you think? Are this country going to be a more powerful someday, or do you have any expectation that your country or our country become more, let's say, our country become the first world country? What do you think, and what is your solution for the world problem? Let's say that.
Well, I wouldn't say I have a specific solution to any of the problems. I think both countries, as developing countries as they are, face a lot of challenges. Both have a lot of problems to deal with on their politicians. They both have a lot of corruption, a lot of misleading, a lot of misuse of the resources and everything. But I think their main their strength, it's in its people. So I think it's the people who need to organize and start taking actions, and the people start noticing the power that they have. I would see good and better future for both countries.
Since we are a Couchsurfing member, I want to ask you about your personal experience involving in Couchsurfing. Could you tell us about what is your involvement contributing in Couchsurfing community, and how do you feel about this kind of spirit that Couchsurfing has generally? And maybe before we close this podcast, I want to ask you a basic question. Let's say this podcast is going to be uploaded, and then in the future you find this podcast again, and what are you going to say in your future self?
Well, about couchsurfing, I really agree and like its philosophy. You know, you have a friend everywhere in the world, you just haven't met him. So I think it's the best way to travel with the locals, where they really open themselves to get to know the culture and everything. And if I had a message for myself, is to keep traveling, keep hosting, keep being open for everyone. Yeah, when I'm back in Mexico, I'm always hosting, always sharing what I have. So when I travel, I don't mind accepting it from others, because it's like going back and forth. No, when you have, you give. When you don't, you accept. It's something like that. No, so it's part of like couching philosophy, and that I agree with very much.
Okay, that's it. That's the first interview that I do with my guests in Couchsurfing, and this podcast is basically the media where I learn to speak and improve my English language speaking skill. And besides, I'm interested in podcasting. Thank you for listening. See ya.